Okay, welcome once again to our virtual club development series. I am Jocelyn Poirier. I'm manager of rugby development at Rugby Ontario, and with me is our club development intern, Justin Bovell. Today we have a different type of session featuring a 4-person panel on the subject of partnerships and stewardship. So I'll be moderating our discussion tonight. And we ask, as always, that to keep your microphones muted while you're listening. Use the chat for questions and comments. I'll start us off with some questions, and then I'll be looking to the chat for some of yours to keep our discussion moving. We'll also probably have some time at the end where we can unmute and have a bit more of a casual discussion. Otherwise, we encourage you to leave your cameras on so we can see and know who we're talking to. And a reminder that we are recording this, so it'll be available for anyone to rewatch or for those who've missed it live. I'm coming to you again from Gananoque, Ontario, the traditional territory of the Wendat, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee people, land covered by the Crawford Purchase of 1783. And Rugby Ontario member clubs and all of us are situated on traditional Indigenous territories across the province. We are grateful to be able to live, play, and learn on these beautiful lands, and are thankful to the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who have been and continue to be caretakers of this land. If any of you would like to acknowledge where you're coming from or share your gratitude or intentions, I'll pause for a sec and go ahead. You can use the chat or unmute to do so. Okay. Otherwise, without further ado, I'll introduce our panelists tonight and we'll get started. So we have Mike Iacovelli, founder and president of the New Caledon Cavaliers Rugby Football Club. Mike, you can give us a wave. We have Chris Warren, who's the executive director at Sustainability Leadership, and he's a board member at the Crusaders Rugby Club and formerly board member of Toronto Rugby Union, among many other positions. We have Haley Jones with us, who's the Sport and Community Development Specialist with the town of Aurora and a True Sport champion as well. And we have Lee Tynan, who's the managing partner at Gilbert Rugby. So some of you may recognize her face or her name from some interactions with Gilbert. Each of these people have a lot of other roles and expertise to share with us, though. So to start us off, I'm going to ask each of them to tell us a little bit about you, your roles, and some of the partnerships that you've been involved in.
What order are we going in, Jocelyn?
Who would like to start? Looks like you.
It's like, well, for where I sing, I look like I'm next to you. I don't know what that looks like for everybody else. So, yeah, so I'm Lee Tynan. I'm excited to be here. Partnership. So, I mean, we are partners with, obviously, we're the Canadian distributor of Gilbert. So we're distributor of the parent company's products, but so in Canada, we exist as our own entity, but we are partners with many of the provincial sport governing bodies, with many of the school governing bodies for sport, as well as Rugby Canada and U Sport. So we have partnerships with like most of the people that touch rugby across the country, as well as sort of more unofficial partnerships with like individual clubs and athletes. Yeah, so it gives you a good flavor of rugby across the whole country. It's pretty great. That's me.
So thanks, Lee.
Mike, you're beside me.
Oh, I'm to the left, you guy. Okay, so I guess I'll go. As Justin pointed out, my name is Mike Iacovelli, president and founder of the New Cavaliers, Caledon Cavaliers Rugby Football Club. Not sure many of you may know, but the club, I think I've pointed out a few times, is not just 3 years old. It is about a 21-year-old club, formerly a women's rugby club, and kind of fizzled out back in 2007. Since reignition back on September 2022, our main partnerships we kind of solidified primarily was with the town of Caledon. We're an affiliate partner with the town. It was extremely important for us to build a bridge with the town from the get-go and to understand the needs of the area and understand where we could kind of find the niche we could fit in and promote what we're trying to achieve. We also partner with Caledon Community Services, which I can speak more about later on. And up until last year, we've been partnering with Bolton Rotary Club, who are also providing support for players and sustaining with fees and registration costs.
Awesome.
All right, I'll jump in next. So also very excited to be here. My name is Haley. I'm the proud mama of 2 little girls. And for me, a lot of these conversations around sport tie back to EDI, so equity, diversity, and inclusion, as well as gender equity in sport. I actually just got back from Cleveland, Ohio for the women's basketball Final Four. Amazing experience. I'm a former professional basketball player. I've coached in youth sports. I've officiated all the way through. And I've been in sport administration for about 15 plus years. So have worn various hats. What I think is most important for this conversation is just looking at how sport is developing and sport is changing, and innovative partnerships doesn't need to fit just with rugby. It's about looking at innovative partnerships with education boards, with municipalities, with, like programs and things of that nature. So I'm hoping to be able to lean into some of that experience with you all today. And so I'm also a safe sport consultant with Generation Safe. So also looking at the culture shift that's happening there. Being a true sport champion, I've launched a leadership course for girls in high school and been able to partner with the board as well to make it a credit course. So I've kind of had my hand in different pieces. As of right now, I'm working at the town of Aurora as the sport and community development specialist. So, Mike, what you're talking about in terms of partnering with your town, I have some examples of what the town of Aurora is doing right now, currently in the sport of rugby, but external to rugby, because I think there's a lot of transferable lessons and kind of approaches that I'm hoping to be able to share with everyone. But in a nutshell, my job at the town is to implement the town approved sport plan. That looks different depending on the background you have. It's pretty subjective. But at the end of the day, looking at, underrepresented and under-resourced demographics, sports that, need a little bit of extra support and what that kind of looks like, looking at sports who are outside that kind of common, when we think of Canada, we think of hockey. How do we get people to experience sport beyond kind of those traditional sports, and understanding that healthy active living is a really important component of wellness. So how are we breaking down those barriers, be it a financial, transportation, what do those gaps look like? So hoping to kind of lean into some of those conversations. I played rugby in high school. I do not consider myself a rugby player, but I did play in high school, and I was the 8th woman because I'm 6'3". So I kind of got forced into that role because I've got long legs and, being part of the lifts, but I was always the last person to any scrum or ruck that was going on. So I do not consider myself a rugby player, but I have a lot of respect for the sport. So I'm sure I'll learn just as much or more from everybody else on this call, but really happy to be here.
All right, and I guess that leaves me. So Chris Warren, happy to jump in here then. So I'm coming to you from Oakville, Ontario. I'm the Vice President of Crusaders Rugby Club, also in Oakville. I'm formerly a board member with the TRU. I also serve on a few other boards. So I'm on the board of Oakville Soccer Club, largest in Canada. I'm also on the board of a couple of public sector regulatory boards, so the Travel Industry Council of Ontario, and as of last month, actually the College of Physiotherapists in Ontario, so sort of health regulatory bodies and industry regulatory bodies. My professional background is in government and government relations. So I used to work for the provincial ministries here in Ontario of energy, infrastructure, and colleges and universities. So pretty diverse ranges of kind of policy knowledge. My GR or government relations background is more related to Brock University. So I was their director of government and community relations. And so part of what I'm bringing, I think, is both that kind of sport lens from a sort of a governance standpoint, perhaps, but also partnerships in the sense of institutional relationships with government at all levels, so federal, provincial, and municipal. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here and take part in this conversation. I'll also say, because I love to introduce the whole person, I'm a big fan of vinyl and classic rock. You can see behind me for anyone who's listening in, or live recordings, right? A little bit of Bryan Adams and Toto and Fleetwood Mac, among others there. So speaking to the whole person, that's some of my interests there and background. So really excited to be with you today.
Thanks. So hopefully you've heard a little bit more context again to the whole person and sort of some of the different things they can speak to today. So if there's pieces that you're like really piqued your interest, you want to hear more about, throw some stuff in the chat and we can dive into those a bit more. But we'll tease out some of it now. So just starting from kind of really basics, if you're listening to this and you're from a club and you're thinking, we should maybe look at building some partnerships. What's kind of the first step that someone should take if they're hoping to build a new partnership? Who would like to jump in first on that one?
I can go. I think I feel like for a lot of like clubs or any organizations, when you're looking at it from the inside, sometimes you don't realize how your messaging needs to be really clear and what your goals are to whoever you're going to speak to. So, you know, if you're looking for partnerships for financial support or partnerships for some type of other type of support, whether it's awareness or, you know, people power support, being really clear from the outset and what you're actually looking for, because I think sometimes, as an example, people will come to us and we're not always clear. Like sometimes it's very clear what people are asking for, but sometimes it's not clear. And I think that, you know, for us, it's, you know, we're usually we're not a financial support, but, you know, if you are going for, especially like larger, you know, partnerships, like having a very clear, you know, sort of formed process, and also knowing that the whole club like is on board with this, as opposed to sometimes people just going off on their own and having like a vision for something. I mean, I understand that it's volunteer and that's sometimes hard to do, to all sit together, but as much as possible, having like just a very clear purpose from the outset in terms of engaging in partnerships.
Maybe I can build on that point, or a few points there. So first of all, I'm gonna give you a little quote here. It's one of my favorites, which is, you can't read the label from inside the jar. So take the opportunity to have a look at how you're perceived externally, because partnerships are not just obviously with your own stakeholders internally, but external by obvious reasons, right? So, you know, think about how you're externally perceived and how you can kind of align. My kind of 3-step plan, your question, Jocelyn, is 1 step, but here's the 3 steps. So one, what Leah said, right? So have a very clear and compelling vision right at the outset that's aligned, right? So, you know, and have some message discipline there too, right? So not having 50 people having 50 different variations of the same conversation. Try and keep it a bit more tighter if you can. But the first is that compelling vision. The second is define success, right? Again, well aligned, but define success. And the third is have some way of measuring progress against your goals, right? And I'm not trying to, you know, make that some kind of, you know, meta narrative at a very high level, very governance-y kind of speak, but really, you know, have goals, right? Set targets and measure progress over time. So I think those are my few things to build off what Lee's already said about how to have successful partnerships, anyways.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing place for me to jump in here. And so what I would also add that Leah mentioned is, you know, you might not be going to somebody for financial support, but don't underestimate the value of in-kind supports. So I know from the town perspective, we're not able to give somebody money, right, to help support your mission. But depending on if you're a new club trying to start up, or you're from an older club and you're trying to expand, or you're trying to work closer with Ontario Rugby and some of those pieces, we might be able to offset some permitting costs. We might be able to look at different supports with elected officials. We might be able to support on social media platforms or development of graphics or communication boards. So for me, the first thing that I wrote down when I was preparing for this is conversations. Networking and relationship building is paramount. Show up. We host Mayor's Roundtable of Sport. And when we first started doing it in the middle of COVID, they were full. And then everybody started getting back into their own routine, right? Priorities take over. And we saw a massive dip in numbers. And just recently, we've started noticing the climb again, which is fantastic. But you know, from a municipality perspective, we don't know what you need until we start chatting. There might be a connection. Maybe the town can't help, but I know that something's happening down the road and I can make those connections as well. So innovative partnerships is an amazing thing, but it starts with showing up. It starts with having those conversations, and, you know, attending conferences. I met Jocelyn at the Sport for Life conference, right? And so just being there and being present, overstanding, of course, that a lot of our organizations are volunteer-led, they are overworked, they are underpaid, and they don't have the time or the capacity. But is there a way that you could apply for grant funding so that your board members or your next up and coming coaches can attend a conference? Right. And so again, that might not be something I can help support from the town, but maybe we look to host the town in Aurora. So now, host the conference in Aurora. So now you cut off all the travel fees, all the extra meal per diems, and now it's more affordable for folks in your club because they're not having to travel or set up childcare or take time off work. So how can we get creative And that's where my role really comes in. So always looking to host conferences, looking to bring in officiating clinics, coaching clinics, and things of that nature. Looking to partner on grants is something as well. Can the municipality help strengthen a grant application? The municipality can't apply for Trillium funding, but organizations can. So that's, again, like looking into that, but having those conversations. Let's go grab a coffee, let's chat, let's find where those synergies are. And so my biggest recommendation coming out of this is don't underestimate the value of in-kind support through those networking relationships and building on those conversations.
So I'll just touch on what Hayley said, purely because of her relationship with the town. I think we've got quite a lot in common. Without the support of municipality, from Caledon's perspective, the club wouldn't exist. Initial conversations began back in 2019, when it was kind of like a pipe dream. And then obviously during COVID, where all of us had a considerable amount of time to sit down and rethink, paths forward. I started to rebuild and reforge some of these relationships with the municipality to see where we could take things. And as Hayley mentioned, with regards to in-kind supports and receiving grants. So with regards to the Cavaliers, we've been fortunate. This is our third year of receiving a municipal and agricultural grant, which is an in-kind support, which covers all our rental fees for all the facilities within Caledon, and that is a huge endeavor. And I think that the total over the last 3 years has been about $40,000. So from a club that's been risen from the ashes with literally nothing in the pot, having that kind of in-kind support and other support, like Hayley mentioned, with regards to we've hosted clinics with Rugby Ontario in partnership with the town of Caledon, where it was a refereeing clinic or a rookie rugby clinic. What I found, the more that you involve them and they can see that you're actually being proactive with working with the community and involving juniors, they're in it and they will help out as much as they can. So yeah, definitely making a relationship with the municipality has been key for us.
Can I just jump in really quickly to point out one more kind of thematic point that actually underpins all four of our remarks here at the outset? So it's about being extroverted, not introverted, right? And fundamentally, as clubs, we're all obviously, run by volunteers for the most part, right? So we have a lot of very passionate rugby people that care about this game, want to grow this game, and provide wonderful experiences for people of all, ages and abilities. But fundamentally, we can also sometimes have a tendency in our sport to be a bit insular, I think, right? And so building, trustful relationships and partnerships is all about just coming out of your shell a bit, right, with a bit of confidence. And as Hayley has said, go and have a coffee and a conversation with some decision makers or other community leaders or other potential partners in your community. But just taking that first step and being a bit more extroverted, tonally anyways, is a good point too. I think that picks up on something we've all said. So just want to point that out.
I just have one other thing I wanted to add about this, because I know this information secondhand, but my dad's home club and Monty's home club is the Centaurs in Burlington, and I went to their 50th anniversary this summer, and they're trying to fundraise to build a new clubhouse, right? So they're looking to raise something like, I don't know, $4 million, which seems insane because they're not at Fletcher's Fields and they're not getting that big chunk of change. But they have been a partner with the city of Burlington since they were formed 50 years ago, right? So they've always been part of why they have that beautiful orange and blue colorway, is because that's the city of Burlington colors. So and I know that part of the conversations they're having with the city of Burlington, right, is to redevelop where the pitch is, but then also putting in accessible recreation spaces, mixed abilities, gym space. And so Burlington's looking to do that. And again, it's like they've got this partnership where Centaurs is going to help them, but that is a great example of something like there's no way a club is going to raise $4 million on their own, but if they partner with the city of Burlington, and I think that's actually something, in addition to all the other things that rugby's challenged by, is keeping clubhouses and keeping that community center. So that was something that, and Nick isn't here, but Nick Mans is amazing, the president of Centaurs. And I know, that's a bit of a long road but they've got a vision and a plan, and they're working very closely with the city on that. And that's partly like the city needs recreation spaces. They need programming for kids, right? So it's like the city needs this as much as the Centaurs do. And I think when you look at it that way, it's an easier, like you don't feel as much like as bashful, I think, going into it, like you're really actually offering the community something incredibly valuable from a healthy living perspective.
So directly beside that part, I would add that 100%. Like and looking at where the municipality sits in terms of taxpayers' dollars, what is our, where is our jurisdiction, kind of where does that line fall? One of the examples that I'd like to offer is just the town of Aurora. We are constantly searching for service provider relationships. And so what that means is that the town is looking for an organization like the Aurora Barbarians to be able to come in and offer rugby. We don't have that specialty in-house. We know that it's a growing sport. We want to be able to help. We just went in on a joint payment to be able to flip one of our fields into a turf. And so there's, longstanding legacy agreements and things like that are being put in. I'd like to give a shout out to our manager that oversees booking and policy, because we've gone through a complete review of our allocation policy. But in addition to that, we're looking to bring on service provider relationships. So the town is able to commit funding to the program development. So it's $40 for an 8-week program. The town does not take enough back off of that to cover our costs. So there's a commitment from the town as well. The town will go through, we do all the promotion, we build out the programs, the program codes, create the list, the rosters, the emergency contacts, and then the Barbs essentially come in and they run the program. So it's free permitting space, it's all those pieces, but our commitment is to help them build their program, which is looking at youth, is looking at girls in sport and all those types of pieces. So we're able to work together on that piece. And then on the other side, the town, we're not looking to run our own rugby program. So we're bringing in the experts who have the coaches and, all of those pieces. And then on our end, it's really onboarding their coaches in the club to say, okay, here's our liability, this is what this looks like, this is our expectation. We provide the free space, and then a high percentage of what the town makes off the registration fees goes back to the Barbs. So then it's also an opportunity for more income flow through their program. And so that I just wanted to offer as an example, to say, like, this is, in addition to facilities, there's also a program delivery aspect.
So going back on what Haley said, we've been doing the same thing. That's actually how we started up 3 years ago. Prior to getting sanctioned, when I was having conversations with the town to go and run rugby clinics at the local recreation centre, you mentioned the word rugby, and then insurance liability was a problem. So chasing down external insurance outside of the town and through private wasn't feasible when you really want to keep the fees down. So one of the things the town did for us was actually offered to run the program through the town, and they onboarded 7 of our coaches, and they were paid positions to run the clinic for the hour session. So the way it's gone now, we can do one or two things. We can do, like Haley mentioned, where it's a 60-40 split. The town eats the cost for the rental facility, takes care of the advertising and so on, and there is a small kickback to the club, which works out really good. Or we can do it the other way, where we're onboarded and we're kind of work as employers. A few of our coaches work as employers for the hour session or 2 hour session, and they actually receive a payment, which a lot of the coaches, they kick back to the club anyway. So that, to clubs that struggle with volunteers, when you can turn around to a junior rookie coach that's 14, because now they can take their NCCP at the age of 14, offering the potential for them to work in a town or municipality position in a recreational program environment, doing something they enjoy and they get paid for it, is huge. And that means it also gives clubs that don't have the ability to practice indoors, like Aurora and a few other clubs in Burlington during the winter, to run in an indoor gym setting at minimal cost. If anything, the club stands probably to make a little bit. Plus, it also acts as a kind of recruiting drive through the off season, ready for the summer.
I can just kind of build on that point as well, so that the relationships and partnerships don't have to exist just between, one club and a municipal partner, right? It can also exist between clubs, right? So a couple of examples. One, so my own club, Crusaders, we partner with Burlington as well as local school boards to put on rookie rugby flag tournaments, right? And host those, right? And so that helps us provide more accessible sport, right? Growing our game in our community. So that's a great partnership there. And then I know Barrie and Georgian Bay, for example, partner on a winter academy. Again, to your point, Mike, trying to expand and be kind of optimize, I'll say, use of indoor spaces, right, to get more kids playing year-round rugby. So, again, partnerships between clubs are important to this conversation as well.
And we know that volunteers are at a premium, so if we can combine our efforts as volunteers, right, why not? I want to come back before we move on to the next one. I want to come back to something we touched on at the very beginning of that in terms of sort of those initial points from Lee and Chris, clear messaging, you know, compelling and aligned, defining success and being able to measure progress. So if clubs kind of have an idea, let's say, of, you know, their purpose and what they're looking for, some of their values, what are some tips you might give them in terms of who to reach out to or how to find a potential partner that would align with their values and their purpose?
Who wants to go first?
You're off mic first, Lee. Do you want to stab at it, take a first stab at it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the thing about rugby that I think is like an incredible opportunity in terms of partnering with anybody, right, is that World Rugby has these 5 values, and the sport is built around these 5 values that are like, they're just like, you know, it's like solid gold, right? Like, who wouldn't want their kids to be part of a sport that had those values, right, of solidarity, respect, you know? And I think businesses in your community, I mean, it's funny because for us, I find like people think we're much bigger than we are, and we can't actually be in business giving away rugby balls that we have to sell, right? But what we have is like an insight into all these different clubs. Also, like, I feel like what we can offer is knowledge about if you want to run a program, we probably know a club that's doing it, or if there's a grant around, we might know about it, or like that's kind of what we offer. But what I see is like, you know, in communities, there's businesses, you know, oftentimes they're people that belong to the rugby club, but maybe there's someone close to the rugby club. Maybe it's a tool and die company, or, I mean, they can be bigger companies like TD Bank and, you know, like, you know, even on a local level, they do have programs. And if you're looking, you know, to sort of, if they want to be connected to a sport that really is inclusive, you know, all you have to do is show a photo of a rugby team, right? You can have somebody who's 5'2" and 6'3" on the same team. And there really isn't, you know, as far as the values of the sport, the fact that there's literally a position for every person and every body type on a rugby team, and the community of rugby. I mean, we all know that. We know it's different because we're part of it. And Justin, when you start playing rugby, you're going to realize as well that it's different. I mean, I've played a lot of sports. There is nothing like rugby for the community aspect. And so from a partnership perspective, I think that's what you lead with. You know, I know I've had people come and say, oh, well, you could set up your booth at the side of the sevens tournament. And it's like an insurance company's not selling insurance to the people at the rugby tournament. What the insurance company wants to do is go to their employees and say, look, we support this program that supports bringing kids into sport. It brings girls into sport. There's mixed abilities rugby. Like, this is all the stuff that rugby is. And, you know, if you look at, I got a chance to meet some of the people from NFP that are sponsoring the national team, right? Like, rugby is kind of a no-brainer for support. And so I think it's like thinking about who in your club knows somebody in the local community that maybe owns a successful business that you might not expect, right? Maybe it's like an industrial company, maybe they make car parts. Like, it doesn't have to be something anyone's thought of, right? But they might have a budget to buy all the kids in the club rugby balls, or to pay for memberships of kids who can't afford it, or for coaching clinics. And then also, I think, like, on a bigger scale, you know, companies like TD and these other companies, they all have budgets to spend on, you know, on being connected to diversity and inclusion. And so I think it's a great opportunity right now. And some of that stuff just takes a little bit more organization and knowing, you know, when to apply and how to apply and whatever. But I think, like, if you get started on it and you have a plan for what, you know, who you want to reach out to. And I think those, I mean, those are really for financial support, but I think that's, to me, the big value proposition for rugby in terms of getting financial support from organizations is that, you know, and then it's like, and then when that happens, bring the people from that company out to the pitch on a weekend and really show them what it's like, and bring them into it and have them play a mixed abilities game. Like, you know, and once they do that, they don't have to hit anybody, right? Like, it's really like a proper partnership in the sense that it's a really fun sport to be connected to. And if you know, build partnerships where you show that, I think, like, you'll end up with partners forever, right? Because once they become a part of the club and they feel part of the family, they're going to stay connected. So I think that's, can't exactly remember what the question was, Jocelyn, but.
It was around how you find potential partners who would align with your values.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really, like, I think those are kind of the universal rugby values. And so I think in a nutshell, that's really, like, making sure when you go to people that they know that, like lead with that, because that is really powerful.
Tell your values kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple quick thoughts to build on that there too. So I think there's a bit of a spectrum here as well, right? So if you're talking about facilities or any kind of capital projects, right, that's a longer runway for one thing, right? There's a lot more detailed kind of process and planning around that too. You know, if your club doesn't have a multi-year strategic plan, you're going to want to probably develop one, right, to align and map onto those facility needs and so on and so forth. So that's one piece. But even the biggest, best strategic plan has to be mapped onto a resourcing plan too, right? So I can say I want a 1 million square foot rugby dedicated facility, but if I don't have the resources to do it or to operate it long term, it's not going to work, right? So you have to, that's where rubber meets road and there's traction there. So that's the one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is grants, right? You know, Haley and others were speaking about grants. You have to kind of know who you are and who your audience is and who you want to serve, right? Even if it's as small as a $10,000 Jumpstart grant, they're going to ask you those same questions, right? Who are you serving, right? How many people? Quantify success for us, define success. So just being thoughtful and self-reflective, I guess, a little bit is important. You know, do you need a multi-year strategic plan to go after a $10,000, you know, Jumpstart grant? No, but do you need one for a capital grant that's going to see you build a new clubhouse? Absolutely. So there's a bit of a spectrum, I think, is the one thought. The other piece there, Jocelyn, is you said, you know, where do you find partners? You know, on the facility side, like local sports councils, if they exist, right? Oftentimes they might be facilitated by the municipalities themselves, right? But if there's a collection of field sports in town, right? Maybe there's representatives from football and track and field and cricket and soccer and so on who can all come together and have a conversation around field usages. In my own municipality, they have a 10-year master plan for parks and recreational facilities and libraries that goes out for public consultation, you know, for updates, right? So again, be informed and to Haley's point before, be proactive, not reactive in some of these initiatives. So I think those are some of my thoughts there. The last one I'll give you as a bit of a bumper sticker. It's one of my go-tos is trustful, not transactional, particularly on the relationship side. Grants can feel transactional, and to an extent they are. You're retroactively applying for something. But when it comes to bigger visioneering projects, it's fundamentally about trust. And be humble to know that you're not necessarily the only decision maker in a room. I'll put it that way, right? If you're representing a rugby club that has 300 members, you might think you're absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure you are. You know, but you know, there might be sports out there that have 15,000, right? There might be municipalities that are dealing in quantums of budget lines that you maybe couldn't even fathom at this point, right? So just be a little humble as well, and try and align with our stakeholders, and be prepared to pivot, to align and get what you need to grow. So a few thoughts there we can unpack perhaps, but there's a bit of a spectrum, I think.
And that's
Okay.
something too, just to chime in, like anyone you're going to reach out to, they'll have on their websites, right? I mean, if it's an organization of a certain level, they'll have information about what they support, what their values are, what they do for community outreach. And so, you know, if you can read a little bit about that ahead of time, you know, it might be something as simple as like their employees all want to come out and you help them play a flag rugby game or something. Like it might be stuff that you're not, you know, that you haven't thought of, like and I think sometimes, like, I find this in any type of a partnership that we work on where people feel it has to be very official, like exactly to your point, it is about trust and it is about the relationship. Like it's all just people, right? And so having, you know, like a 40-page contract, you know, at the end of the day, if it's not a good relationship, you know, when it's up, and I mean, we do this all the time. It's like, I'm not going to hold people to all these things if they're not able to do it. Like we do find that, right? A lot of sports organizations just can't live up to what they've promised, and we don't expect them to, right? Our goal is to support rugby. And so, you know, I think sometimes with partnerships, people do get like really fixated on like the like agreements and not about the spirit of the partnership. And that's like exactly like people have said, it's like a conversation, right? It's like, well, what would you guys want out of this? What if the girls rugby team came to your office one day and I don't know, like talked about what it's like and what they've learned from rugby, right? Like it could be something, you know, especially in spaces where they're trying to really promote women in leadership. You know, female rugby players are an amazing, you know, community of athletes to have come and speak. And that doesn't cost anything, right? And it would be a great leadership opportunity for the athletes. Yeah.
Going
Okay.
touching on that, and then speaking with what Chris said with regards to grants. doing your homework beforehand, if you know where you want, if you're fortunate enough to be successful in obtaining a grant, doing the homework beforehand so you haven't got to be reactive is really important. We kind of learned our lesson last year because we received a Canada Parks and Recreational grant, which was built for women in sports and a number of other things, looking after families from marginalized backgrounds. And although the whole process was like an 8-month process, by the time it was all said and done, we found out at the beginning of the season, well, mid-season, that we were fortunate in winning the grant, obtaining the grant. But then what you don't realize is with a lot of these grants, it's a use it or lose it kind of deal. So they gave it, you have like 4 months, 4 or 5 months at that time, at that point, then I think it was 4 months we had to fully utilize all the funds that were provided, or we had to give it back. So although we'd done a little bit of homework and we knew where we wanted things to be allocated, there was some running around. So yeah, it makes a big difference if you can try and do some planning beforehand.
Sorry, very quickly on Mike's point there, you do have to report back, right? You don't just get a grant and spend the money and that's it. You have to report back to the grant funder and demonstrate, value and impact of some way. So to Mike's point, again, forward planning is important because it'll help you also with your ultimate success, right? And then you'll get more funding and so on and so forth, right? Funding begets funding. That's kind of the way grants work, right? And if you haven't been a responsible actor, you're not likely to get another grant in future.
So take pictures. Post it. No, I'm serious, right? Like if you do something, take pictures and show people.
100%.
Like, and so then when you go at the end of the year and you say, thanks so much, like you can include some pictures, right? Like who doesn't love photos of a whole bunch of little kids running around playing rugby?
Yeah, we invite. So for the leadership course I was mentioning, so we got a $15,000 grant to launch the first ever. It's called the Recreation and Healthy Active Living Leadership Course. The town runs it. And we are partnered with a online high school called Ask Online Canada. And we were able to work with YRDSB, so York Region District School Board, so that it's actually worth a grade 12 credit. I was part of my role, so I facilitate in class. We have a teacher on the back end that's marking, and then the principal is through this online platform. So when we have I hosted a women in sport luncheon, and we were able to partner with Coach Association of Ontario to offer free NCCP courses to women. Additional to that, with my role, I was able to go through some channels, and the town was able to offer free childcare and meals and all of those things. So we're trying to again remove those barriers. But at the end of the day, I invited Jumpstart to come. I invited Ask Online to come. The pictures are one thing. If somebody's local, they can come and talk. They can come experience. They can be in the photos. And then we know that, social media is its own beast. But then those are the pieces where we need to start to think a little bit differently about how we're posting it, where we're posting it. So we know that the most uptake is on Insta stories on Instagram, not in the grids. Right. And so looking differently on that. And then these are the kinds of things that you can post on LinkedIn. So, going back to the points that were mentioned before, where are you posting and why? How are you promoting? Where are you promoting? We know that our retention of women and girls is so low, but we know that if a mom or the female role model in a youth's life is active, she, as the young girl, is 22% more likely to be involved in sport as she continues to grow. So what are we doing to include women in those conversations? How are we including newcomers to Canada? What are those conversations? And that's conversations that we're having right now to be able to, we're launching a program called Strong in Sport. And the whole intent behind that is how do we get girls that are newcomers to Canada, newcomers to our area from our census data, to be able to participate with the municipality. So how can we make it so that if they pay this registration fee, it actually gets credited back to their account so that they can now use that money to be part of another program moving forward? So again, how are you engaging? What are those conversations like? And then finding out, doing your research. What are the buzzwords? What do those organizations want to hear? Where are they supporting? We just applied for participation grants. Women and girls was not part of their initial demographics or areas that they were trying to support. But again, I picked up the phone and I found the person I needed to talk to and say, hey, look, these are things we want to do. Would you support it? So we ended up putting in 2 different grants partnering, or 2 different applications partnering with local sporting organizations. One was around having a Pride Day for LGBTQ2S+ youth, family, and teens. And the other one was for a girls only leadership camp day. We're calling Lead Her, and that's going to run on a PA day. But we're able to now bring in local sporting organizations. Again, we've taken care of the permitting. We're taking care of the checks and balances, the permitting, all these pieces. Show up and deliver your program, the sport that you love. And so what can the municipality, what can the school board, how can we help offset some of these conversations? And then the other thing, just going back to doing your research, right? Who is looking for what are people looking to support? What have they supported in the past? And then being able, I know on the Jumpstart grants, you have to say where you're getting other potential support from. And when I first saw that, I'm like, oh, if I tell them that the town's going to offset permitting costs, maybe they won't give me as much money. Again, I picked up the phone, I developed the relationship, and I actually learned that it makes your application stronger the more people you can show that support what initiative you're trying to do. So the more people listed there, the more organizations listed there, the more offset you can list there, it actually strengthens your application. And so again, it's kind of learning the nuances of those pieces. And if you fail, when you fail, which we all do, it's then following up and having that conversation, because next time your grant goes in, they know, okay, yeah, they wanted to learn, they want to know better. And so I found that was a really positive piece in terms of that relationship building to find grant money and find different partnerships as well.
Awesome. Lots there. Yeah, I recently was at a talk with a BMO representative involved in their sponsorship side, and she was talking about, like, I'm not here to pay for your kit. I'm buying the story. So tell me, like, sell me a good story and I'll pay for whatever will help with that kind of thing. So exactly what you're talking about, right? The pictures, the involvement, like, get them out, let them see the impact, give them a good story to tell about what their involvement is doing, whether it's financial or otherwise. So we're going to build on this. We've touched on it in a few places, but I want to talk more now about maintaining relationships. So what are some of the important factors that you consider when it comes to actually maintaining partnerships? Once we've gotten past that sort of initial partnership, we've got an application in and we've set up a program, how do you make sure that's not a one-time thing?
Yeah, I'll go again. So first and the next. So for us, I mean, I think part of the trick in sport is that people are all volunteers and it is hard to maintain relationships. It is really hard. And I think you actually just have to have a little bit of a plan at the start of how you're going to do that and understand what would be helpful to the partner, because, you know, we have had relationships for years where we've been the official supplier of OFSA and we send them out rugby balls, and then OFSA is not organized in a way that they can tell us these is all the coaches that have high school rugby, because they're like, well, this school had it one year and they don't have it this year and they don't have a database, right? So we had an official partnership, and now, you know, it's like, for me, it doesn't need to be official. We'll support the OFSA tournaments. We'll provide balls. We don't need a contract because you don't have anything you can give us back. So all we ask is, like, when you have the tournament, send us a picture. Like, but I would say that that's because we're committed to supporting rugby in Canada. Are we directly getting, if we were looking for some, like, return on investment that was, like, measurable, would those partnerships, like, it's kind of nebulous, right? Because you can't really measure, you know, you can look and see, okay, well, some high schools came and ordered from us, but some of the high schools order from other places, or if they buy their balls. Like, I would say it's, like, at the outset, knowing what, obviously there's parameters in a partnership that people are asking for, but if you feel like you can't manage all of them, just actually say, like, what would be helpful? Because for us, really, it's like, if you can just get us some great pictures, and, you know, what we really care about is supporting, like, we're not as, obviously we focus on, we support high performance, but we're really more about culture and values. So I say specifically for Canada, I wouldn't necessarily say that for head office, but those are the things that are great for us, right? Is, like, you know, some photos we can reshare on social. I think for kids, it's cool to be connected to a brand like Gilbert. So that's, you know, I like the idea that we can reshare photos of some kids from tournaments and things. But as far as, like, what comes back, I think oftentimes it's like, oh, it's the tournament again. Oh God, we need the balls. And then we get asked for the balls, we send the balls, and then we see them. And I go, okay. And I'll say, listen, guys, if you want any more support, we plan everything out at the start of the year because we get asked for so much stuff. And everybody goes, yeah. And then the next year we're like, hey, you know, and it's just kind of the nature of sports. So I think if you build it into your calendar, okay, these are our partners, and like, let's make sure that somebody sends tickets to this person or just invites them to our like fall sevens tournament or something, you know, and someone's in charge of that and it's in their calendar. Because oftentimes it's just like little things like that we're all busy, you know, and rugby is largely volunteer. And I think that's what makes it hard to maintain partnerships in a way that and I think for grant organizations and you know, obviously you have to show what you actually did, but I'm more also talking about partnerships like with community businesses and things like that. Like they don't have to support this. So they want to feel like they feel good about it, whether there was a financial outcome for them or it was more just about feeling good about supporting a really cool community sport in their community.
Maybe I can just kind of build on that there. So two thoughts from my end. One is actually what Leah said here too, which is have a plan, but have a calendar, right? So especially from a government standpoint, right? You know, your mayors, your councillors, your MPs, your MPPs, etc. Have a calendar of the year of dates and key moments for you of visibility in the community. So whether it's, you know, tournaments or home games or whatever that you've got that you want to invite folks out to and make a real kind of special moment of it, whether it's existing events in the community that you want to bolt on to, everything from, you know, maybe it's a Remembrance Day, for example, you know, lay a wreath there. Maybe that matters. Maybe it's a school tournament you want to have a particular showing at. You know, maybe there's a you know, a fun fair or whatever it is in your community, etc. So just lay out a map of the year or calendar of the year and kind of have a plan of action for each of those dates to have a presence at. So that's the first piece. The second about relationships in particular and maintaining them, to me is about follow-up, right? And having discipline in follow-up. So I can't tell you the number of times when I was in government that I was lobbied. I never got a note afterwards, you know, and I don't just mean following up on next steps. Like you'll identify next steps to the meeting and you should definitely follow up on those. I also mean following up on the meeting itself, just being, you know, grateful, right? Hey, you know, hey, Chris, really nice to meet you. You know, thanks for the time. Looking forward to connecting again in a couple weeks' time, right? So just the most basic things. I think sometimes, you know, the pace of our lives these days, my goodness, I'm sounding old now, but anyways, the pace of our lives is just so fast that we forget those little small gestures of gratitude, which are important as well in maintaining relationships. So a couple thoughts there, one around follow-up and the other around a calendar. Oh, sorry, and actually ownership, I'm sorry as well. So you have a calendar, you have events, have ownership, right? So be clear about who's doing what, right? So to Lee's point, you're not letting things creep up on you last minute and then you're you're trying to jive and tack in short order, right? So try and be thoughtful and advanced plan these things with ownership to individual people.
Mike, did you want to weigh in on that?
I agree. I think, you know, from my end, it's, you know, it's the follow-up, it's the conversations, it's, you know, just because when are you coming to the town, I think, to engage in conversation? Is it because you've hit a dead end in something? Is it because you're looking to problem solve? Or are you, you know, actively looking to engage, right? So where does that relationship come in? And not that one is better than the other. It's just my hands get tied personally if I don't have enough of a runway or, you know, those types of conversations. And are you a club that shows up to our roundtables and shows up to different workshops and things like that we offer? Or do I only hear from you, you know, if you need me to, you know, make things move? You know, I think it's that, you know, that people first approach that we've talked about is so important. Building those relationships is so important. And then, you know, there's also things that, you know, again, innovative thinking, you know, the connection in terms of following up with our mayor. Do you want the mayor to come out to a piece? What does that look like? You know, making sure that, you know, that we have our land acknowledgement included. Like there's pieces that need to be followed. And it's about respect at the end of the day. And it's making sure that we're all on the same page. We all have the same, you know, for the most part, the same goals in terms of wellness, healthy, active living, creating lifetime, long time, healthy, active living people. And so it's really about how we can work together on a lot of those pieces. And if you don't show up, we don't know, or we just don't even know you. And I think that that's a loss, right? There's so many opportunities to work together, and the follow-up piece is so big. Some of our LSOs, if they can't make the mayor's roundtable, for example, will send me a note, will send me an email like, hey, I saw this, just want to let you know we're out of town. So those little things go such a far way. And it really does make a difference at the end of the day as well.
Yeah, I think keeping an open chain of dialogue and communication with the town and the council and the mayor is important. Not always having to pick up the phone or send an email because, like you mentioned, is because you're looking for something or support again. What I find with ours, more often than not, they'll be reaching out to us because they know we've got an event coming up. Because we've kept them abreast of everything that's going on, and they're asking us, can we come? What can we do to help? And it makes a big difference.
So on this same sort of theme of maintaining relationships and just sort of stewardship in general, wondering if any of you have any sort of lessons learned, or lessons you'd share, whether it's something that was sort of unique and novel in a good way, something that worked really well that you hadn't seen before, or maybe something where you said, oh, okay, I'm never going to do that, or I'm not going to do that again, from previous partnerships, relationships you've been in.
Yeah, actually give an example of, so I went to Tropical Sevens, last, oh gosh, it's been a blur. Not this past weekend, the weekend before. I've never been. Oh my gosh, who here has been? Emily, have you been? Oh my God, it's like so much fun. Everybody has to go.
I was there too.
It's insane. First of all, you've never seen. You have to, like, you can watch the videos online. It does not show off. And half the teams are Canadian, which is amazing. And it's so much fun and it's so well organized. But I went down there because we sort of launched Team Kit in a bigger way this year. And we partnered with two organizations this year, Turf and McDowell Rugby, for the Team Kit. So those are the two partners we chose coming out of at the start of the year. So we did the elite women's team for Tropical Sevens is the Team Kit we sponsored. And I've never gone to Tropical Sevens, and Robin said, you should come down. And the interesting thing is Robin is our sales rep, but he treated me in this case like I was a client, like a partner. And he said, it was a stroke of genius. I mean, I'm going to give him whatever he wants for the rest of the time for this team because I had so much fun. And I went down and I stayed at the hotel with his whole team. He had 90 athletes there. The night before the tournament, every single team individually came in and they spoke to the team and their parents. The coach spoke to them. Maxine spoke to them about the programs, and then I spoke to them and we did a jersey presentation. It took like 4.5, 5 hours to go through all the teams, but every single athlete then, like, they're like, we could do it in all one big room, but it feels way more special if we each group. So now you have buy-in from all those parents. You've got, and you don't know who those parents are, right? Like there may be some potential partners there, but for me personally, as the person sponsoring the Team Kit, he's like, you're going to be with us, this elite women's team, the whole weekend. Like I was in the huddle, I was at the warm up, I was on the team bus. I wish I was still 27 and not 46. I'm like, maybe I'm going to come back as a rugby player and not a triathlete, but it was so much fun. And I can only imagine, like, if we could just get all the people we need to sponsor Rugby Canada, like MasterCard and like TD Bank and all this, if we could just get them to go and have that experience with the national women's team, we'd have too much money. We wouldn't know what to do with it. Honestly, it was such an incredible experience. And so don't underestimate like that for me as a, like the partner of the Team Kit, it was like a total thing that I didn't know was a bucket list experience. And it was like, I'm in the van with all the girls, the tunes are pumping. Like I was like absolutely in heaven. And the thing is, that would be something like, if someone was a partner now, like that's like, I will be the partner now going forward because I'm like the value in that. All the older athletes and the elite athletes are mentoring the younger athletes. It's like everything that I value in terms of bringing people into rugby is exactly what I saw over those 3 days. And that is something I think in terms of maintaining a partnership, it's like that experience for me was like an 11 out of 10. And if you can offer something like that to people you want to partner with, my gosh. It's like just fantastic. It was amazing.
Anyone can top that?
Did you
No,
shoot the
everyone else
boot?
in the chair, yeah.
Pardon?
Did you
Did
shoot
you
the
shoot
boot?
the
You
boot?
said.
No, I didn't have. You know, it's I
Yeah,
didn't know I was gonna have so much fun. And I had to get back. Like I had been away for a family wedding anyhow. I had to get back. So I had to leave early on the last day. And then they won the whole tournament. And I was like the plane landed in Toronto and I'm like watching all the stuff on social media. And I was like, oh my God, why didn't I just change my flight? Like it's just like, bring me back. I want to go again.
So I think from my end, one thing that, we learn so much in failure and so much more in defeat. And I mean, all of us have been involved in sport in different levels. And so I think for me, like my university coach is still the head coach. So I went to McMaster and played basketball there under Teresa Burns. And I remember she pulled me into her office because I was really frustrated about different things as an athlete. And she was like, just because your house is on fire doesn't mean somebody else's is. And so that was a really big turning point in how I approach different relationships. And so one of the things, hard lesson to learn is I might think I've got a great product, or I might think that I've got something that should be supported, or I might think that I've got, the gold for all the pieces of what everybody's looking for. But at the end of the day, I don't know what else is going on the other side of the table. And so that's a really big thing. And so in terms of putting your notes together, how you're going to approach different conversations, what do those pieces look like? If you don't succeed, it might not be because you don't have a good enough product. Sometimes it's just that something else came along that might be a little bit stronger or a little bit more thought out or a little bit more in the direction that that company or organization is looking for. It doesn't mean that what you have is negative or bad. And so it's kind of removing those negative connotations from defeat or from failure. And then in terms of somebody else's house being on fire, I might have a deadline, but that doesn't mean that everybody else has the same deadline. So, working for a municipality, our fiscal year matches the calendar year. I've never worked in an organization where it's not like an April to May. I used to work at York University, and so I was manager of varsity athletics. I oversaw the, high performance sport, market driven sport, all of those pieces. I had worked at the OUA prior to that as a senior sports coordinator. And so I've managed rugby at very high levels. And so one of the hardest pieces was also working with your officiating assigners and all of these different pieces. But my timelines for scheduling, for official assignments, for, whether it's at Fletcher's or not, like all of these conversations, I needed the details and the information. But again, I'm working for organizations that are overworked, underpaid, and don't have the support. So again, being mindful of what's happening on the other end of that email. Somebody's probably not ignoring you if they haven't gotten back, but sending those prompts, like Chris was talking about, following up and leading with gratitude is a massive piece. It comes back to that people first. And we all have different communication styles, different leadership styles, but ultimately going back and thinking about the needs and wants of the organizations and the people that you're speaking to be able to speak a little bit more of their language and then welcome them in and then say, okay, yes, these are the things that we're doing. These are the amazing pieces. It's being able to find a way to communicate those. And I didn't learn that until I fell flat on my face, as most of us do. But, looking at how can I help bring somebody into our world? How can I help show them that? Sometimes it's in person. Sometimes it's it's the emails, it's the follow-ups, it's the invites. But it's that people first approach that I think is going to get you further in what you're trying to look for.
Just really quickly to build on that too, and again, I've used the word spectrum before, right? But on the corporate partnership side, there certainly is. So larger companies, you can sell them more on a narrative, right? And they'll be, I think, less detail oriented, frankly, in terms of what they get, as long as they're associated with a brand and a series of values and a very community sort of driven initiative, right? So they're more narrative aligned, I think, but they need longer lead times, right, for decision making, right? So be thoughtful and prepared in advance. Smaller mom and pop, independent diner in your local community, shorter lead times, right? You can probably maybe get the $500 sponsorship in pretty short order, but they're going to be a bit more detail oriented, I suspect. Like if you promised 4 social media posts to recognize their diner and you only gave them 3, they're probably going to notice that, right? So just recognizing, again, to Haley's point and others about, kind of just being thoughtful in your approach to relationships and differentiating them based on who you're talking to. Again, big corporate Canada, manager of sponsorships versus independent small business owner, a little bit different. Ultimately, though, the common through line, I think Haley used the word before, is about respect and trust and relationships, right? That's the through line between both. But just recognizing that there's different lead times, different lengths of time, and one is a bit more narrative aligned, I think, than the other.
I was thinking too, so Jocelyn, when you had the BMO person speak, did they talk at all about their new value, like their statement? I'm trying to remember what it is, because I interviewed the head of marketing for a video. Do you know,
No,
did they talk about it? It's what is the
It was at
tagline?
the Ontario Soccer Summit, and they had like a kind of women in sport luncheon talk, and it was this rep from BMO and a leader from the Angel City.
Okay, yeah, okay. Because I met all those women, and the thing that I thought was so interesting, so they have this incredible, and I am not remembering it right now, but it's like, it literally is like served up for rugby. Like their tagline is like, but then also the thing that's interesting is in meeting those women, it's like, they're all moms. And it's like, what sports do their kids do? Like, and so I think that's the other thing, even when you're dealing with corporate partners, these people all have like lives outside of work, right? So they're making decisions, but also they're personally going to sell that. If they believe in what the story you're telling them and what you're talking about, they're going to go and sell it to their company, right? So that's the other thing to remember, right? Is like, I mean, that was something I was thinking about with this experience going to Tropical Sevens. Like for me, these elite athletes, the point of them is to inspire more people to get involved in sport. How many people go to the Olympics? Almost nobody. I look at it and think why we need the Olympics is so that more people get involved in sport, and girls and boys look at those athletes and say, I want to try that. And we know that that happens. But so for me, at these elite women, it's like when they go and talk to the younger girls and and they come and watch the younger girls game at the start of the tournament, they come specifically to the place to come and watch the U16 girls. And then we all get a picture with them together. And that to me, like for me personally, as the person I'm the Gilbert person, but my personal values, like that just checked all the boxes. So to be mindful, right, of like and that just comes up in conversation when you're walking into a meeting, like, oh, I just took my kid to practice. Oh, what did your kid do? Like, and then it's like people will share their own personal stuff. And I think that is like, because once you get people like the story is good, but you need to know why it matters to them. And you don't know that unless you know something about the person.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, mindful of time, we're going to get into some individual questions for each of you to kind of dig into a little bit more of your individual experiences and context you can share. And then those of you with us, if you've got any questions, throw them in the chat and we'll leave a bit of time hopefully to get to those as well. So Mike, I'll start with you. If you can talk a little bit more about your partnership with Caledon Community Services and sort of how that established and what it really entails.
Yeah, sure. So going back to the original relationship with the town of Caledon, we maintained dialogue because we wanted to make sure that we were first and foremost there to support people that needed the support that weren't able to participate in organised sports. So this took some real traction last year when we were fortunate in receiving the CPRA grant for building women in sports and helping families from marginalised backgrounds. So the first thing we did after we received the grant, knowing that we were really behind the 8 ball and we needed to use it or lose it, and we really wanted the money to go to the people that needed it, the first thing that I did, I went straight to the town, spoke to my contacts in recreation over there, and I said, look, this is a situation, where can we go? Can you put me in the right direction? So they pointed me in the direction of Caledon Community Services, CCS, who I reached out to. We had a couple of meetings straight off the bat, and to be truthful, I didn't know too much about it until I had the meeting. And in a nutshell, they mentioned that they service 450 families from the Caledon area that need the help, and pretty much they have children that are in the families that would love to play in organised sports, but unfortunately are unable to for various reasons. And I know you and I have had some conversations in the past, but one of the things that came to light during the whole process, because, okay, now all of a sudden we're fortunate, we've been lucky to get the grant, we can pass the grant money on to the people that need it. Well, the one thing that was kind of embarrassing as well. But going to the families through Caledon Community Services, the one thing I'm sure you all might be able to guess this, but what is the one thing you would need to be able to register with a rugby club, even though fees are paid?
ID?
A computer,
Oh, computer, yeah.
access to internet, a credit card. Unfortunately, some of the things that we all deal with Sports Lomo, they're not the easiest or to be able to do. They're not geared to be able to, I think, to look after situations like this. So we had to set up some events where we had our registrar personally go to Caledon Community Services, sit down with the families individually, walk them through registering with the club on her personal laptop, and obviously working with Caledon Community Services from the fees perspective, because the parents needed to be there, because obviously, like, you know, there are liabilities that parents need to sign off on for children or anybody to participate within our rugby world. So although you know, we would try to remain as inclusive and as possible, that was one of the barriers I think that we kind of hit from the get-go, knowing that the financial support was all of a sudden in our hands and we could give it to somebody. We just couldn't kind of get it off the ground. So this is our second year working with Caledon Community Services. Our registrar has an appointment with them. I think it's this week actually, where she's going to sit down with a few more families. But that, I'm sure most areas. I mean, I'll ask Hayley the question. I'm sure Aurora may have something similar. But for most rugby clubs looking to be able to hand over the olive branch and support the community, a lot of rugby clubs may not even know that these facilities exist. So if there's any possibility that you can actually help, I would suggest doing what we did by going straight to the municipality and say, okay, this is a situation. We want to invite as many people as we can to try and participate in organised sports. The club, and I'm sure most clubs can support a portion, or you know, a certain finite amount of people to register. Because if it was my way, I think I'd have everybody paying for free, but that's not really feasible. But yeah, definitely make your first point of call, reaching out to the municipality, people in recreation, like Hayley, and see if you have organisations like that in your area that maybe you could reach out to and support.
Thanks, Mike. Chris, you've got a lot of experience on boards and with government. So I'm wondering, you've spoken about it already a little bit, but if you can speak a bit more to why you think those sort of relationships with local government are important, and maybe some advice for clubs who might be looking to develop or improve those relationships.
Yeah, for sure. So I thought maybe I'd start with a quick definition. So of stakeholders, that is, right? So stakeholders are people or organizations that we can affect or who can affect us, right? In its most simple form, that's what they are. Local government meets both definitions, right? So, you know, by operating within a municipality's boundaries and providing services, right? Providing, you know, rugby and camps and so on and so forth, you're providing value to the municipality, to the community, to taxpayers, to residents, right? To community members. All of that resonates very strongly with both elected and non-elected officials. But then, of course, they're also decision makers, right? So everything from, you know, field space allocations or whether there's indoor space in your community, et cetera. These are all big, you know, picture items that ultimately they hold the pen on, not you, right? So they're an important stakeholder in both respects. I think maybe I'll do a quick Gallup poll if it's helpful for those who are online, and you can use the reaction function at the kind of lower middle part of your screen there. But just by show of hands, I'm curious, who knows the first and last name of their federal member of parliament? Just by show of hands, their federal MP for their local community. Anyone? Hands up. MP for the area. I don't see any hands just yet.
Oh, I can picture.
I see one. We've got one. We've got two.
The post.
All right, brilliant. We've got two. That's brilliant. Okay. Now keep your hands up or add your hand up if you know the name first and last of your provincial member of parliament, your MPP. So if you can either keep your hand up or add, we've got two hands so far, I see. Any others there? Our MPP for the area. We're dropping down to one, even fewer, even one. All right, fantastic. Now, your mayor, first and last name of the mayor of the municipality in which you reside. Just curious, put your hand up or keep it up if you know the mayor, the first and last name. All right, we've got a few more hands going up there. That's brilliant. Okay, and last question now. Here's the tricky one. first and last name of the counselor, the municipal counselor that represents your local neighborhood. This is a tricky one. I'm expecting all the hands to drop down now. We've still got a few up though. That's brilliant. All right. Really fun exercise, little Gallup poll there, right? So, these are all officials that are important for you to know, right? To engage with them thoughtfully. Good government relations and community relations is not having a coffee or a pint with someone once a year, right? And only one person, right? Being a bit more proactive in that relationship building is important. Your federal MP can be a key conduit to federal grant programs, including the Canada Summer Jobs Program, which can help you get some summer camps going. Your provincial member of parliament, your MPP for your area can be a conduit to additional funding, right? So Ontario Trillium Foundation grants, for example, both capital and operating streams. Your mayor and your councillors can be conduits to access, whether in kind, as Haley and others were talking about, in kind contributions or services, access to town-run facilities or city-run facilities, access to, sport councils or advisory groups that might then spark a larger conversation around, bigger infrastructure asks, depending on the size of your club or your needs. And so again, it's a fun Gallup poll, but it's important to know who these people are and to engage with them thoughtfully, because they are stakeholders. And as I said at the start, you both affect them and they definitely affect you. So know their names. That's where I'd start.
Yes. Haley, you have another role that you mentioned at the start, I think, or I mentioned, that we haven't talked too much about. Can you talk about your role as a True Sport ambassador and how that sort of intersects with some of the other roles and partnerships, what that means?
Yeah, so True Sport, for folks who are unaware, is a initiative that is under CCES, which is Canadian Ethics in Sport, and so it's at the federal level. And True Sport has gone through a recent, I'm going to call like a revamp. And so there are 7 principles that are in alignment, there's 7 principles as part of True Sport. So go for it, play fair, respect others, keep it fun, stay healthy, include everyone, and give back. And so it's really looking at value-based sport and this approach to sport to, start to get people thinking about redefining success. And so for a long time, we had Own the Podium, which would lead us to all believe that you were only successful if you were at the top of the podium. But what if your sport doesn't fit in with that mindset? Or what about all of our amazing athletes that are becoming leaders in our community and changing the world? And so looking at some of those pieces is where True Sport was born out of. So I'm a True Sport champion. I'm a very proud True Sport champion. And so True Sport has a program that's available for clubs, organizations, municipalities to sign up with. So if you're not currently involved, I absolutely recommend that you go online to True Sport. And on there, you can learn all of the ways that you can declare to become a True Sport organization. This is very much a positive approach. So it's not that if something happens in your organization that does not align with the 7 principles, you'll have your True Sports, declaration revoked. It's not about that. It's really about looking at how we're making sport fun, inclusive, and safe. And there's a lot of different ways that you can have those conversations, but to declare that you're a True Sport organization or you're a True Sport club will go a long way. To put that statement on your website, to talk to people about what True Sport is and why you're in alignment with it is ultimately likely going to open up the door for more people to join your club. So the belief is that if you have these 7 principles as part of your organization, that you'll be able to have better quality sport experiences, retain more athletes, and develop better, more well-rounded people at the end of the day. And so, yes, it's kind of redefining that success. That's my own personal take on it. But I take my True Sport values into all the conversations that I have. So when I'm talking about allocation policies and what does that look like? And so, for example, Town of Aurora just went through a massive reallocation review. And part of the conversation that I was involved in was to say, you know what, there are some microaggressions in our policies in terms of the language that we're using. So something like taking the word grandfathering out of all documents would be a recommendation, using the word legacy instead. Looking at, our allocation policy very much favored organizations and clubs that have been around. It's not to take that away, but it's to say that those were primarily white cisgendered male clubs and organizations. So then to look at how new girls only programs were coming, newcomer programs. So we work very closely with Canadian Immigration Community Services. So to look and to work with CICS on translation documents and things of that nature, all of that work was being done, but then we weren't actually able to find permitting opportunities. So re-looking at some of those policies, and so being able to bring my true sport values into those conversations became extremely important. Looking at, giving back. When I was working at York, our women's rugby team was fantastic. I am still, in contact with some of them, primarily on LinkedIn. But, how do we give back through our sport, or how do we use sport as a vehicle to break down those barriers and have those additional conversations? So when you go into schools, and like Lee was talking about, when you have the women's rugby team come in to talk about, opportunities and influence and things of that nature, the opening line is, I'm a rugby player, but we have to look at intersectionality and the intersectionalism of who we are. We're not just a women's rugby player, right? Moms, we're partners, we're businesswomen, we're all of these other pieces. And so we have to start to look at some of those different identities that we have and we bring to the table, because as my age continues to get older, we're not cool anymore. So how are we empowering these amazing athletes that are able to make more of a change? We're on the back end. That's where we belong right now. But how are we creating more opportunities? And so looking at what true sport is, it's very much a value-based sport. It's a commitment to ethical sport. It's a commitment to safe sport. And it's a commitment to looking at people as the whole, and not what they produce. So looking at redefining success. It's not about just being at the top of the podium. That might be one of our goals, but that's not the only goal. And then we look at how social media gets into these pieces and everything else. So looking again at value-based sport. And so I will say that from the municipal perspective, currently undergoing some pieces to look at what does that mean to become a true sport municipality? How can the town, again, help offset some of the responsibilities off of our clubs and organizations to make it easier? Right? If you want to sign up as a true sport municipality or a true sport organization, these are the things that you can do, right? To make it very easy. So we're taking off that research. So again, from an in-kind perspective, to be able to look and say, okay, that there's somebody in the town that wants to work with you. There's somebody there that wants to talk to you. They might not have the same title as I do, but there's somebody there. It's about having those conversations show up at the local rec center and start to talk about, who can I contact with? Who works with LSOs? What do these pieces look like? I know part of our allocation policy, we also have reduced fees for our local sporting organizations. So for a club from Richmond Hill to rent our dome is a much different price than for our local or regional sports clubs to rent our dome, for an example. We have space that our local sporting organizations can have for free for their AGM. And that's where then I can come in and talk about true sport. I can talk about the roles of the municipality. So if you aren't familiar with true sport, absolutely recommend for you to look into it. You can declare as an organization, you can declare as an individual. There are learning opportunities to then become where I am as a true sport champion. We just finished a full week of professional development from across the country and just learning about what other people are doing in that world. Part of your club, you could have a true sport award, right? So how are you recognizing not the MVPs of the team, but how are you recognizing the people who, that are sweeping the shed, so to speak, from the book legacy, right? So how are you recognizing, those people? So, some food for thought. Would be more than happy to connect with anybody after about what true sport is and how you can get involved.
Thanks, Haley. Yeah, lots of potential there with true sport, and it is an interesting piece, and then it's not cookie cutter right in its application. It is very, very flexible to work with what you're doing and your values. So open table, if anyone has any questions that have come up, anything specific that you want to ask, that you want to get out of any of these 4 people while we have them here.
Oh, and we skipped my question because we agreed I'd already talked about it.
Nothing in the chat. You guys covered everything so well.
Somebody.
All their questions, all their greatest desires are answered. One thing I will ask you all to finish with before we go is just kind of final thoughts. What would you like to see clubs take away from this conversation, whether they're here or watching the recording? What would you like to see them take away from this?
I think the biggest thing for me is, I mean, obviously other people here are much more versed in like the policy and the like municipal type of execution and grant stuff. But for me, I think really just like rugby is so cool and unique in terms of what it offers young people in terms of a community and a sport experience. And you need to tell people about that because they don't know. If they've never played rugby, they don't know why it's different and special. And in terms of any type of a partnership, you want to partner with people where those values and that gets them excited, and they can't get excited about it if they don't know. So that I think is my biggest takeaway, is just make sure that people really understand, you know, your rugby, once you're in the rugby community, you're in the rugby community for life. And, you know, you don't even have to be a player.
They can't know what they haven't seen though, right? You got to show them.
Yeah, totally.
Thanks, Sue.
I think on my end, it's that there's somebody who wants to engage with you. You need to find who that person is. And that we learn so much in defeat or in failure, and, you know, taking those lessons off the pitch, and we need to live it ourselves and to find another way to get it done. But ultimately at the municipality, there's somebody who wants to engage with you. And at the end of the day, if the bylaws aren't able to help, or their hands are tied, it's then, you know, then lobbying for, you know, what those changes need to look like. It's showing up to town council, it's showing up and, you know, having your voice and finding those opportunities, and then taking it one step further. Because at the end of the day, if you don't do it now, our kids, you know, the next generation, my daughters that I spoke about at the beginning of the call, our goal for them is to be further than us. Our goal for them is to have more opportunities and more opportunities to succeed. And so at the end of the day, if we're not pushing, and we're not the ones out there having those conversations, then they're not going to be in a better place than we are now.
Okay.
Go ahead,
I think, yeah, I think try not to think too much out the box. Having been part of a few clubs over my years, with regards to looking for support, you tend to kind of think big, when really speaking, it's under your nose, on your doorstep, in your municipality, in your town. Those are the guys that can be the biggest advocates for you. You've just got to engage, and you know, and try not to think too big. It's right there. I hope some of the clubs will take some of the things that we've mentioned and, you know, reach out. They might be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, don't overcomplicate it, right?
Yeah, I'd agree with everything that's already been said. I think, you know, identify your stakeholders, build trustful relationships with those stakeholders, again, through engagement, and everyone has said that. I think the other point for me is about just sort of, again, defining success and having some way of measuring it. You know, you can have 30 meetings, you know, that go nowhere, or you can have 3 meetings that change the world, right? So try and put yourself in a position to change and have an impact in some way. But as everyone said, there are champions in your local municipality, in your community, perhaps even in other, you know, sports, right? Like, go and speak to, you know, football and soccer and cricket and others. And, you know, you might find that they're going through similar challenges as you. And there might be opportunities to collaborate and share best practices. So, you know, look for that. And the other point I'll make too is we talked a lot about partnerships between, you know, a club and a municipality, kind of more bilateral. But think about partnerships between clubs. I gave the shout outs to, you know, to Crew in Burlington and to Georgian Bay and Barrie, but there are lots of examples across the province. So let's spur more partnerships between clubs horizontally as well.
And I also just had one other thought. You could take a photo of a high school rugby practice or like a U18 or U16, and there's all these teenagers and none of them are on their phones. And that is honestly, that is very novel these days. So I think that's a pretty incredible thing as a parent of a teenager.
Yeah, so it's just a comment in the chat there, Kelly, looking for some more connection on some of the programs Haley mentioned. So anyone else here or watching the recording, if you're looking for more information, if you have more specific questions about your individual context, or you want to, you know, pick Mike's brain about what they've done or hear more about what Lee's done, you know, talk to Chris about connections. I'm not going to volunteer their emails necessarily, but I think thumbs up. Most of them are probably welcome to that. And I'm happy to kind of make those introductions as well. So yeah, if you've got questions, watching this
reach
or
out
to come
anytime.
up later, connect, and we're happy to make those connections and continue these conversations offline, or in a different sense online, shall we say. So with that, we'll say thank you to the four of you for taking your time, sharing all your expertise. That was great. I think we covered a whole lot, and I know I took a lot out of that. I'm sure everyone here and watching did as well. And thank you to all of you for taking the time, whether you're here or if you're watching. We really appreciate it, and I want to just keep sharing all of these ideas and developing our wonderful sport and our community of clubs. So we are back for our final session. I believe it will be a new day and time. It'll be April 18th at 7 p.m. So it's not a Monday at 8 p.m. Put it in your calendar, 18th, 7 p.m. For a presentation on transitioning to ONCA, which is the Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. Deadline for that is coming up in October. So that'll be an important conversation that you're going to want to be a part of. Other than that, I wish you all a wonderful evening, and we'll hopefully talk to you all soon.
Yeah, thank you, Jocelyn, for organizing this, and for Justin as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Justin.
Great
Bye.
evening, everybody. Yeah, rocked it. Yeah.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye all. Thank you.
Bye.